We are so pleased to have on set today Darcy Lee, who is the author of Ghosts of Plymouth, Massachusetts. Welcome, Darcy.
Thank you, Julie.
You're not only an author, there's other history behind you, so what is it?
Yes, I am a nonprofit executive specializing in fundraising.
Yep, especially for girls.
Yes, right now I'm the Director of Development for the Women's Fund of Southeastern Massachusetts, but in the past some people may know me as the person who ran the capital campaign at Pilgrim Hall Museum and also consulted for First Parish Plymouth, Plymouth 400, among other organizations.
So you're into history.
Yes.
Clearly, so this is one of the reasons why you wrote this book.
That is correct.
So people think of Plymouth as America's hometown and a celebration and wonderful and happy. And on the back of your book, it's funny because part of what you say is Plymouth actually, the real story of the town, is a tale of grim beginnings, plague, desperation, massacre, murder, and fear. So how do you circle that square?
Sure. Well, Plymouth itself, prior to when the Pilgrims landed in 1620, was the home of the Patuxent Indians.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 years prior to the Pilgrim landing, that tribe was decimated. They were felled by the plague. And so when the Pilgrims arrived, they arrived to bleach white bones on the land that they would then settle. And let's remember, too, that the Pilgrims did not have an easy journey here to the New World. They were set off course by a terrible storm. Disease also infiltrated their community, and they lost half of their community within the first winter.
Yeah. Okay. So they arrived to this place where it was really the only thing there, and the landscape was these bleached bones of this Native American tribe who had all died.
That's correct.
So that kind of begins not a great soulful place to start your lives.
It was a hard place
Yeah.
to start the new lives of the Pilgrims who were searching for religious freedom. And so we can just imagine the fear and desperation that they felt. That could be embedded in the land. I believe it is, and I believe that's why Plymouth is so haunted.
Okay, so you talk about a number of different places in Plymouth that you believe have hauntings or is haunted for one reason or another. So let's start with Burial Hill, which is a beautiful historic location here in downtown Plymouth.
It is indeed a beautiful and historic location, and it offers people, visitors, as well as people who live in the community, one of the best views
of the harbor.
Of the harbor.
It's stunning.
So it is stunning, but it's also very haunted. And it may not be haunted by the people who are buried there, necessarily their bones because they're buried there, but instead it's haunted by the people who would have been visiting there in real life. There's a Victorian couple that walks up and down Burial Hill from Summer Street to a small white grave marked Ida Lizzie, 3 years. I did the historical research behind it, the genealogical research, and I found out who that couple was. It was Elizabeth and Thomas Spear, and they were visiting the grave of their daughter, Ida Elizabeth.
Who died at 3 years old.
Who died at 3 years old.
And people have actually seen these apparitions?
People have seen the full body apparitions of this couple dressed in a Victorian attire. Now, they would be walking up and down the hill carrying with them a great sense of grief, loss, and sorrow. And so that type of haunting is considered a residual haunting, where it's like a movie that plays over and over of what the people would have been doing in their real lives. And that's why that imprint is there, and that imprint is so strong.
Wow. Okay. The houses of downtown Plymouth, there's a number of houses that you refer to in the book that have different hauntings associated with them. Why don't you tell us about a few of those?
Sure. One that comes to mind is the Winslow Warren House. That's located on the corner of North Street and Main Street. It is not open to the public. It is currently serving as office space as well as a storefront. But I got firsthand from a person who ran a business there that it is haunted by the person who originally built it, General James Winslow.
Okay.
And he made himself appear in full body apparition at the time when the office space that she was using as a store was being renovated. And that makes a lot of sense for hauntings, because when you start to stir up what the bones of the house,
The original foundation.
the original
Yep.
foundation, the original structure of the house, those that remain behind might be a little bit uncomfortable with that. It changes their perspective of the house. They might not even know that they're haunting the house, but they know where they're at. And so for him to appear at that time while they were doing construction, I think
interesting.
is pretty
Yeah.
significant.
And there was another mention of shoes that were in the
Yes.
walls. So what
Yes.
does that mean? And what's the
Shoes-
significance of that?
Sure. This was in a private residence.
Okay.
And those shoes that were found in the walls could be a little bit creepy to people, right?
Yeah.
Sounds a little creepy when you
Shoes in the
open up
walls,
the
yep.
wall to do renovations and you find children's shoes in the walls. It's not creepy at all, actually.
Okay.
In fact, for hundreds of years, from Western Europe, it was a tradition in Western Europe and made its way here to the colonies. People would put shoes in walls because they believed that the aroma of a human foot would attract a demon, and the demon would make its way into the shoe and get caught at the toe and not be able to
Get back out. Like a lobster trap.
like a lobster trap.
Okay.
So those shoes brought good fortune to the home, and they were also a sign of fertility for the home.
Wow.
So that's where we get this tradition of shoes and walls.
Okay.
Now that particular home, once the shoes were removed from the walls, did experience a haunting that was more than mischievous
Okay.
and more like a poltergeist type haunting.
Okay, which is not the good kind of haunting.
Not the good kind.
The John Carver Inn, and there's another section on the show today about a paranormal group that came through the John Carver Inn, and that is said to be quite haunted.
It's quite haunted, and we did an investigation during Plymouth Paracon, which was in September. We did an investigation of room 309, which is considered the most haunted room in the hotel.
Okay.
There's lots that came out of that investigation, so it was pretty exciting, but there's still more pieces to put together. We don't know if it was indeed true that there was a house where medical students lived on that property,
site,
on
right?
that
Yeah.
site, but it's likely
Yeah.
because on that site was once the site of hundreds of homes that were demolished during urban renewal
Yep.
in the 1960s, and a street on that site was Thatcher Street, named for Dr. James Thatcher.
Right.
He actually owned the property on that street. So it could be likely that there were medical students living in a home. It's not uncommon that grave robbing happened.
So that they could practice on the
That
cadavers.
they could practice
Yep.
on the cadavers and learn about anatomy, and then return them to Burial
To Burial Hill. Okay, so there you go. There's the connection there. How do you measure, by the way, what is the measurement of if there's something in the room that shouldn't be there?
Well, there are a number of different ways that paranormal investigators measure. They measure with a K2 meter, so
Which
it's
is?
an electromagnetic field detector. It
Okay.
detects energy in the room.
Okay.
There's also a new app out that's being employed. We actually used it for the first time during the investigation of the Church of the Pilgrimage. It's called EchoVox.
Okay.
And that picks up phonetic sounds that then can be put together as words by any sort of
interesting.
spirit or entity that wants to
Communicate
be
with you.
present, can communicate with us.
They can
in the room.
communicate via app.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. Cordage Park?
Cordage Park, a lot of people think that it's very, very haunted. I would say it's very haunted rather than very, very haunted.
Okay. It's
Of
where they
course,
used to make ropes.
It's right.
Yep.
That's right. It's the former rope factory.
Yep.
And so lots and lots of people pass through those doors
Yep.
every day for hundreds, or more than 100 years. There were also other buildings on the Cordage site that served for different purposes.
Okay.
Tragically, someone was murdered in a building on the site
Okay.
that was connected to an office building that had also been part of the Cordage Company. That office building is reportedly haunted,
Okay,
where
and
electronics go a little haywire.
Okay. And lastly, in our last few seconds, the lighthouse.
Sure, the
that
Gurnett
overlooks- yep.
Lighthouse is reportedly haunted by the first keeper's wife, Hannah, who watches over. Lighthouses evoke a certain romanticism.
Anyway, folklore,
right?
all of them, yeah.
All of them. But it's also haunted, the Gurnet itself is haunted by the seamen who perished on the brigantine General Arnold, where they froze to death in the blizzard of 1778.
And the entire
Gurnet.
crew.
And
The entire crew of that
right.
ship was wiped out.
Most of the
Yeah,
crew.
and that's really, it's a really sad story, and
It's a
you
very
go into
sad
that in your
story.
book also.
Yes,
Yeah,
I do.
Well, I mean, there's people who love this or are interested in this. The Ghosts of Plymouth, Massachusetts is a fascinating read. It's very educational, and there's a lot of history in here too, which is wonderful. Thank you, Darcy. It was so good to have you.
Thank you.